So an unfortunate design choice in the Ford 3.5 and 3.7 liter V6 engines, they used an internal water pump driven off of the timing chain. The unfortunate side effect of this is that there is the possibility of ruining your engine if you miss the period after one of the seals on that water pump fails. It can allow coolant to leach into the engine oil, and that will ruin the engine in short order. Now, what a lot of folks recommend, of course, is frequent oil changes and frequent coolant changes. That being said, a lot of these vehicles are getting up there in mileage, and you are probably not the first owner of that vehicle, and you don't necessarily know how well the seals were maintained by previous owners. We don't necessarily know what their fluid intervals were. So, an extra layer of security that you can add is to put a fluid level sensor on your coolant tank. Now, obviously, the best thing is to routinely check your coolant level. Let's say that you're busy, you don't think about it for a few weeks, one of your seals fails, and coolant starts leaching in during a busy period of your life, and you miss it, and the engine suffers coolant infiltration into the engine oil. Well, now you're hosed. So what you can do, you can add a capacitive sensor which straps onto the outside of the coolant reservoir tank, as you can see here. Lincolns have low washer fluid level indicators, and this is based on a simple float switch. When that switch closes and makes contact, it draws a lead off of the powertrain control module to chassis ground, presenting 0 volts to that lead, and in turn that will throw a warning on your dashboard during engine startup, and only at engine startup. You won't see a warning if the fluid goes low while you're driving, but getting a warning at engine start, pretty helpful. That's a pretty good opportunity to stop when you see low washer fluid on the dashboard, pop the hood, investigate what's going on under. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a tap off of that sensor. It's located above the splash guard at the front of the vehicle. The best way to know what you're going for is to actually go to a junk vehicle yard and find either an MKT or an MKS, or maybe some of the MKZs that have the same tank. Ford Taurus uses something similar. So you got a lot of options to get yourself in the ballpark of what you're looking for. Identify what that sensor looks like, where it is in the vehicle, and then on your own vehicle, you can probably locate that. On this vehicle, I can actually access this without jacking the car up. Once you know what you're looking for, that's the key. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a extension cord that goes down to the location and the connector, which normally goes to that fluid level sensor for the washer fluid, and you're going to need to make sure that that is a matching connector, and so I'll provide the parts for that in the description for the video. That'll allow you to make a good water resistant seal, because that's low to the ground, and you've got good odds of picking up some splash water, and you don't want your protection circuit to suffer corrosion. So you disconnect it and drop your extension line into it, bring it all the way up here, route it out. I found this refrigerant line to be a decent anchor. Not the best solution in the world, but the best of the options that I had available. And you can connect into a capacitive sensor zip tied as such. And so the way that I've connected this sensor in is I have my matching connector set. This is a Molex connector. I identified the part numbers from a vehicle at a scrapyard. That allowed me to procure the parts that I would need for making this extension cable and the mating connector, which would go into the capacitive sensor. And this is my supply line for 12 volts DC, and I've routed that across the stress member there. And I've used an add-a-fuse right here. This goes to the evap canister purge solenoid because it is always powered on and it is not a critical system, so that if this were to work loose at some point, because there's a bit of a lever arm on here, and so there is some risk of that. If it were to work loose, it's not critical, and it would show up as a emissions fault, and so you would get a fault code if something were off. But it'd be nothing critical. It wouldn't really affect any performance characteristics of the engine, but you would get a warning if you lost power there. And so we have some redundancy. Now, of course, this is going to require that anybody driving the car knows that low washer fluid actually means low coolant. So you'll want to put some sort of placard in view of the driver to indicate that a low washer fluid indication is actually a low coolant and something of a more critical condition than typical for that warning. You could, of course, make a cable to parallel the low washer fluid indicator with the capacitive fluid level sensor here, and I plan to arrange something along those lines in the future. But for now, this is a viable alternative to risking engine damage.